Hey y'all, so for this month's tutorial I am going to be making a replica of one of the Digi Crests from the first series of Digimon, as well as a Digi Egg from the second series of Digimon. Almost all of my tutorials thus far has been Pokemon themed. I've done, I think, 2 Pokemon tutorials at this point, so I decided to switch it up so much and do Digimon instead. So original. But yeah, so I'm making the tag for the crest first out of this gold color Sculpey clay. Now, before we go any further, I did this back in January. My L's box that I did my January video on was taking forever to get here, like it usually does. So I wanted to make sure that I had a video to do in its place. So I'm just now getting back around to doing this one, so yeah. After digging around for a few minutes to try to find all my tools, I finally did. So I grabbed my rolling pin as well as a handful of popsicle sticks. This is a neat trick. If you want to get a sheet of clay to a certain width, you just stack up 2 stacks of the popsicle sticks, however thick you want the clay to be. And I try to measure it with the actual crest that I have. I actually bought that crest at a con a few years ago, so I'm using it as the main reference, and of course I'm using the picture for the actual egg. You can get a pasta machine for this. Any kind of pasta machine will work, as long as you're not using it for actual pasta, because this stuff is toxic if you consume it. It's not toxic if you inhale the fumes from the oven. It's not toxic if you touch it, obviously. It's only when you consume it. So, so don't use a pasta machine that you're actually making pasta with. But if you don't want to go out and spend money on this, this is a very cheap alternative. Again, using the actual crest for the, or the tag rather, for reference, I'm trying to cut it about the same angle. I am doing it at a slightly off angle. It's not a blunt cut straight down. I am have it at a bit of an angle so that the sides will there be angled. Hopefully you guys can tell. I think you can tell the tip of it. It did take me a little while to get it completely done, and I didn't do it exactly well. This is always my weakest part, is trying to cut things out symmetrically while making them as perfect as possible to what I'm referencing. So I didn't do so good here. So here I grabbed my needle tool and started trying to etch the details into the clay. I started by outlining the crest, and you can see that's where I made a mistake. It's way too narrow for the actual design, because I am going to be painting in the crest later, so, or the design of the crest later, so yeah. I try to fix that later. But then I go into the sides, and you can see I'm making the little rounded detailing on the bottom. And then I go in and try to make the, for lack of a better term, squiggles on the very bottom of the tag, as you can see there in the replica. I don't make every line perfect, but I get it close enough that you know what it is. As you can see, the top part of the tag is kind of more hollow, so I tried to kind of emulate that just by slicing a chunk of it off the top, and I did it a little bit too well. It was really thin, and they're just, when that compared to the size of the crest that I just indented, I knew it wasn't right. So you can see I went ahead and just cut that off, and I do add another piece in here in a second. So I just grabbed an extra piece of the gold clay, and I'm trying to blend it in like I did with my Nidoran in my Nidoran video. I wasn't successful. Let me just put it that way. I was not successful. I trimmed it. I added to it again. I got it looking as close as I could to good in the end. So you can see I added a little hole at the very top for a chain to go through. There is no way in heck I'm putting a chain on this. It's way too not secure for that. But also I am going in with my X-Acto knife and cutting the crest out, or the spot where the crest is going to go. I did make it a little bit larger. Still not the proper size that it needed to be, and you will see the consequences of that later on when I'm painting the design of the crest. By the way, this is going to be the Crest of Courage, which was Ty's crest, and the egg that I'm going to be making is, what was that egg called? Wasn't it? Don't they just call it the Digi Egg of Courage, which was Davis's Digi Egg for Digimon? So yeah. So, out of all the Digi-Eggs from the second series, the Egg of Courage is the only one that actually looks like an egg. So I got some red piece of clay and tried to round it out as best as possible. Now here's the thing with some of the clay. Even though I washed my hands, I still had some sparkles left over from the gold clay, and then the red clay will stain your hands. So you have to be sure that you're cleaning pretty thoroughly during this. You can see the red coming off on the Q-tip. If your piece gets dirty, if you get sparkles or something in it, the best way to clean it up is with a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol. That's also the best way to clean your hands as well. So yeah, it'll take care of a lot of the fingerprints, a lot of fuzz. If you're patient enough, you can make it perfect. I'm not that patient, so I got all the prominent spots out, and that was pretty much it. The Egg of Courage stands on the thinner part of the egg, like what we would call like the top of the egg. So in order just to make it a little bit more stable, I took my X-Acto knife and made a diagonal cut at the very bottom. Still trying to make it a little bit skinnier that way, trying to redefine it a little bit, just so it could stand stably in the oven. Not sure if anyone notices, but if you do happen to see that the egg is bigger than it was before, I did remake it because I felt it was a little bit too small. So all those processes just got repeated again. And then finally, for the clay part of this, there is a spike that protrudes from the top of the egg. So I just took some silver clay, and you can see I'm working on a piece of wax paper. The white part of that table is actually just a piece of poster board, which is what I usually work on top of, so I didn't really need to protect it, but I did anyway, just so it won't keep staining. So using the picture for reference off camera, I simply make a small blade cut. I made a small blade cut with my blade. Sounds weird, but you guys know what I'm talking about. I cut out the shape using my X-Acto knife. Once the spike is cut out, I grab my liquid Sculpey, which is just liquid clay that will allow the clay to bond together like a glue in the oven. And I also grab a small piece of wire and cut it up with my pliers. I'm just going to stick the little wire, I just used the word, into the top of the helmet in about the middle from the angle that I cut the bottom at. I think I'm just trying to place it exactly right there. With a little bit of liquid Sculpey in it. What am I doing? Remember guys, it's been like over a month. I'm doing the voiceover middle of February, so it's been like over a month since I've done this, so I'm trying to remember as I go along. I dip the needle into the liquid Sculpey, and what am I doing? Anyway, I eventually stick the blade part into the egg. I am not going to blend it this time because it's supposed to be just bluntly, up against it. So I'm just trying to make sure the shape and everything's right and that it's all secure. Oh well, I guess I did blend it a little bit. Okay, like I said, I'm trying to remember this stuff as I went along. What I really need to start doing is taking notes as I'm doing it for the voiceover. That would be the smart move, wouldn't it? Oh well, after I get this done, I put this and the tag and bake them according to the package's instructions. And it's back to the normal table, yay. So after everything is out of the oven and properly cooled, I take some paint and I try to mix up a lighter orange color for the painting on the egg and for later on the crust. This is the part that takes some patience, especially if you're like me and you have to have the perfect color. The perfect color. Now, if you do decide to mix your paints, definitely get one of these little paint pots. You know, they're really cheap. They're the kind that you see in like children's art kits. So you can buy them pretty cheaply off Amazon or craft stores, and they will keep the paint fresh for a very long time. After playing around with the colors of orange, yellow, and white, I finally get the perfect light color, I feel, for this project. So again, I am constantly referencing the picture of the Digi Egg of Courage off camera, and with my dotting tool, my smallest pointed dotting tool, I am carefully making the design for the Crest of Courage on the front of the Digi Egg. I will go ahead and say this right now. This crest I'm drawing right now turns out a whole lot better than the one on the actual crest does. A whole lot better than the one on the actual crest does. So the dotting tool, the bad thing about working with that is that you have to constantly keep dipping it back into the paint. Because obviously, you know, it's just a metal stick. It's not going to absorb the paint like a haired brush would. But you do get really small, precise detailing work that you wouldn't get for even a small size brush. So, and it's easier to handle because it's not, you know, flexible. After I got the crest finished, I started on the flame pattern that is around the top and the bottom of the egg. This is the part I pretty much kind of winged it in a way because I could only see one angle of the egg from, you know, the piece of paper that I printed it out on. If I went back and watched the digivolving sequence, because I'm pretty sure that the egg made a 360 in that sequence that they played in like nearly every episode, but I didn't think to go back and watch it until I'm sitting here talking about it. So yeah, so the flame pattern might not be exact as it does on the reference picture, and I'm sorry my hand's in the way. But after I do the outline, I do go back with a thin paintbrush and paint in all the rest of it with the same orange color. After the orange has been completely opaque, it took about, I want to say 2 to 3 coats on the orange on the top part. The crest went in just once. I only had to do once with that, but with the paintbrush you have to do more coats. So after that, I'm making another outline with the yellow for the same pattern as, you know, on the picture of the Digi Egg of Courage. And this one you can see I'm just taking it straight out of the bottle. And this pattern will be repeated on the bottom side of the egg too. I'm just doing it one at a time so it can dry properly. So, some of you may now be asking the question, why do you have tinfoil on the table? The answer? I have no idea why I grabbed that tinfoil. The tinfoil is what I baked the pizzas on. Why I grabbed it for here, I don't know, because it looks horrible with the light in the camera and the glare, and I'm sorry. But anyway, so I'm putting some masking tape, packing tape, on the edges of the crest because I am planning on putting the crest with UV resin. Now with the Nidoran one, I just used regular Scotch tape. That's better than what I'm using now. I found that out. This tape, it's not any better sticky wise really, but it's just easier to handle and you're not as clumsy with it because it's you know, larger. So yeah, that was mistake number 1, well, actually, no, mistake number 2. The size of the crest was the number 1, but that was mistake number 2 when it came to doing the crest. And here comes mistake number 3. So you can see I already put a little bit of UV resin in that mixing bowl. If my hand wasn't in the way, you can see it. Now, before you saw the tag I was using, the crest and tag I was using for reference, that is the crest of love. The one I'm making is the crest of courage. 2 different colors. And I put the red coloring in here instead of the orange. You can see that's when I figured it out. I'm like, wait, this is red. I'm supposed to be using orange for the crest of courage. So yeah. Now I'm not going to show you guys the images completely of me attempting to fix this when I'm curing it. So I have 2 different shades of orange colorant. I have that one that's almost more of a yellow, but that one's actually labeled orange, and then I have a deep orange color, which I should have used in the first place. But I was trying to make do with the red that I've already made, and I thought that was a good color when I mixed, that lighter orange with it. But here's the problem. I only had a very small amount of that UV resin in there for the first part, because I was only going to do the edges in order to seal them. When you have a large apparently it wasn't the proper color, so when you have a larger ratio of color to resin, the resin will not cure properly. If I were to put that colorant directly under a UV light with no resin in it, it doesn't cure. It needs the resin to cure. So if you have, even with the additional resin that I'm putting in, it still didn't help. I put so much colorant in there by the end of it, and so little resin compared to it, it just did not cure. It came out sticky no matter how long I tried it. So yeah, you can see I'm trying here. But trust me, it didn't work. So let me just go ahead and skip to the part where I actually got my crap together and started working right. So the resin you see there, it's not properly cured. Again, I know I said I was going to skip, but what the heck. Why not show you guys the failure? I know you can't tell, but you can. There was actually fingerprints in it from where I tried, and it just wasn't curing. So I took pure resin and put it directly on the edges, 86ing the tape, in order to keep back the resin for when I actually put the right color on. So between the fail of the resin, the tape that leaked because it was way too bulky and I couldn't secure it properly, and the new layer of resin of just plain resin, clear resin that I put for the border, the borders became really, really lumpy and not blunt with or even with the sides. So I just took a small nail file and filed down the resin. This is perfectly safe to file down the resin. Any little scuff marks that appear in the resin piece or even in the clay piece will disappear if you put a layer of UV resin on top of it. I don't know if I do that for the tag, but I definitely do that for, well, the crest is going to be UV resin anyway, so I just put a little bit on the side to cover it up. But yeah, a nail file is what I use for all my magnets and stuff, so it's perfectly safe to use. So I would still highly recommend, if you guys were to do this project, to use UV resin. Just don't be dumb with it like I did. So you wouldn't have to resort to your tried and true method of epoxy resin. UV is honestly a lot better to work with a project this small, but at this point I was just like, you know what, epoxy resin hasn't failed me too much yet. I haven't had this much problem with UV or the epoxy resin yet. So I just went ahead and made a very small batch of epoxy resin to use for it. Recently, from the recording of this video, I posted a video on Instagram about what happens when you don't mix your resin ratio properly when you're using epoxy resin. It just will not cure properly. It will always be a little bit sticky. It will always be flexible. It will never cure into a solid piece. So definitely read your instructions and follow the directions very carefully when you're using resin, and also wear gloves and a mask, please, too. I also wear an apron because I've already ruined about 3 shirts from spilling resin on them. Yeah. After putting a small amount in a mixing bowl, I get the proper color for orange, put only a couple drops in. When I was rewatching the footage, I realized I later on put a lot of that lighter orange color in it, trying to make it perfect. That's where the ratio came way off balance. So, yeah, after a quick stir, why am I using a toothpick? I never use a toothpick to stir this stuff. Weird. But I would recommend using a silicone. I forgot I used the bat symbol I made to try and press. I put more tape on there? When did that happen? A month ago, that's when it happened. But I would recommend using a silicone mold of some kind, just in case the resin spills. It will not come off of paper like I'm using there. I have accidentally spilled it on my table, and I didn't know it until it already cured, and I actually had to file it off, so be careful. But you can see I'm finally putting just a little bit in there, spreading it out with the toothpick to the edge. I'm not putting it over, or I'm trying not to put it over it. Some of it did come over the edge that I made. Sorry for my hair being in the frame and my glasses. But I'm just trying to get all the air bubbles out and put it as close to the edge as possible. 12 hours later, I have a perfectly cured piece of resin. Finally. So the edges again are a little bumpy because now it has the clear UV resin with the colored resin on top. And I think here is where I make another mistake somewhere here along the line here in a second. Not with the resin this time, but with the clay. So again, I'm just filing that down. I'm trying to be gentle about it. You want to be gentle about it so you don't end up cracking clay, because this type of clay, Sculpey, is not the strongest, as you're about to see. Fimo is a little bit stronger. It's just a teeny bit harder to work with. By the way, the egg did crack a little bit, but it wasn't bad enough that I totally, 86'd it and started again. In fact, I don't even think you guys ever saw it in the video. So I just left it like that. It didn't bug me all that much. I just tried to paint over it as best as possible. Any second now, I'm about to make the mistake with the clay. I know what happens. There we are. So the piece that I attached in the beginning, I did not attach it good enough. I did not use liquid Sculpey. I did not blend it properly. I'm an idiot. So I just went back to filing that thing, and I reattached that part later with super glue. So here I am attempting to draw the Crest of Courage onto the crest. So if you know Digimon, this probably looks familiar, but not as familiar as it should. Each of the crests have its own design, and the Crest of Courage looks a little bit like a tribal sun, while the Crest of Light looks like a flower. This looks more like the Crest of Light, unfortunately, than it does the Crest of Courage. And that's just because I just can't paint that small, and I just made too small of a crest. So, but I sure as heck wasn't starting over after all this, so I just left it be. It's not perfect, not by far. The one on the egg is much better, but this one's good enough for now. I knew I wasn't going to be needing that much of it, so to make the darker gray that I'm going to paint on the blade of the egg, I just take a piece of tin foil and mix the color on top of that. It was just easier than finding another clean paint pot canister or cleaning out one of the ones that was already there. So very careful. Again, I am really picky when it comes to mixing my colors. I think I've actually sat there for like 10 minutes trying to get a color perfect for like one little spot, and I end up wasting so much paint. Oh, I have that bad habit. Finally though, once the proper paint color has been mixed, I take my pointer tool. Again, why do I keep calling a pointy tool? That's not my needle tool. This is my dotting tool. My dotting tool, and painting half the blade in that darker gray color right where the tinfoil is in the frame so you guys can barely see it. I apologize. I will try never to put tinfoil in a video unless it's absolutely necessary ever again. As the final touch, I take the egg. Oh, by the way, there was a black outline on the bottom. I did film myself, but I felt it was kind of repetitive from what I did at the top, that I just didn't include it. I just painted a small black line with that same dotting tool that I used the rest of the paint on. But I think the egg came out really good. And the last part is to take some Mod Podge that's been mixed with water and just put it on. I'm going to pick it up here in a second after I take the camera out, but I put 2 coats of this stuff all over the egg, and yeah, make sure to hold on to it. Don't do it for film purposes, just hold on to it. One more try with the UV. I put a small drop of it in that little silicone mold and paint on the UV to protect the paint. You can see there right at the edge, it's taken away that scuff mark that the file left behind too, like I said earlier. I'm trying to hold the camera with one hand while doing it with the other. That's why I'm not holding them steady. Yeah, and ignore the Marvin the Martian magnet in frame. It has nothing to do with this project. I just had to do it at the same time, so why not? So after multiple attempts with the resin, I want to say it took about a week to do this completely with breaks and stuff because I was doing things in between, and then waiting a month to do it. Now you saw when I turned the tag around, you saw that there was a little bit of metallic paint up there. I tried to do it to cover up the glue spot, and I ended up painting the back of it with a silver or a gold paint. I'm not going to add this in because I'm trying to make these a little bit shorter. I'm not succeeding, but I'm trying to make them a little bit shorter. But I did go ahead and paint the rest of it. But I think all in all, these things turned out pretty well. If it wasn't for the crappy background on this picture, I honestly think I would print this off and frame it. I actually really like the way those look together with that pop. But anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I actually did enjoy it despite the ups and downs I had with the resin part of it. I am thinking about going ahead and doing the rest of the Digi Eggs from the second season of Digimon, or the second series, and just make one full tutorial where I'm just making the rest of them out of clay and then painting them. So comment down below if you guys would be interested in that, as well as any other like nerdy replicas you think I can, attempt to do out of polymer clay and or resin. As you saw with the Nidoran one, resin is on my side occasionally. So I was just being stupid here. But anyway, guys, yes, please comment below. The next craft video will be a custom Funko Pop. So make sure you stay tuned for that one. And thank you guys so much for watching this. Thank you guys so much for supporting these craft and custom videos. They really mean a lot to me. And remember, guys, like always, it's a community and not a competition. I'll see y'all later. Bye.